Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. I'm your co-host for today, Mike Bailey, along with Ellen DePlacido. Ellen, are you there?
I am. Good morning,
Yes,
Mike.
good morning. Hey, last two times in fact, you weren't even with us the last two times, were you? When
I was
we
not.
talked about mosquitoes, we had a discussion of mosquitoes and ticks. This time we're going to kind of stay in a similar vein, if you will, and we're going to talk about some plants, poisonous plants that you might run into in your garden and our yard. Those being poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac. Okay,
hmm
so uh, those particular plants, can actually cause a severe rash, or a what they call a contact dermatitis, where you get blistering of the skin, etc., and stuff like that. It becomes very very itchy. And but as we walk through this, we want to do a couple of different things. We want to talk about plant ID. We want to talk about this overall contact hazard, if you will, dealing with that oil, and what to do if you're exposed to that substance. Okay, how do you treat that rash, and then eliminating the plant. So that's how we're going to walk through this. Okay, so Ellen,
Okay.
why don't you kind of start off by giving us some kind of an idea of how our listeners might, ID the three different types of plants.
Okay. First of all, I want to start with poison ivy because that's probably the most common in our area. It is native to our area. It's very easy to come upon, especially if you're walking in the woods or live in the country. It does have leaves that change colors. They're kind of shiny green early in the year, but then they start turning to a dull green and then a mix of yellow, red, and orange in the fall, like most leaves do. But also, you could see small white blossoms early in the year that may be followed by some small white berries. Now, what I found very interesting was that poison ivy is basically more a ground cover. And in some cases, it will climb vertical supports. It could even climb up walls of buildings, but that's not real common because it's mostly found in rural areas. The second then we wanted to talk about was poison oak. And these all belong to the same genus. So they have a lot of characteristics that are very the same. But it's not as common as poison ivy. But it's typically found in royal areas. And the leaves are very similar to poison ivy, but you can see kind of a wavy appearance in the leaves that are green in the spring and yellowish pink in the summer, and then brown in the fall. So the leaves are about the same size as poison ivy, and poison oak can grow as a shrub or a vine that will climb vertical supports. And most of the time, poison oak is found also in rural areas, sometimes in dry pine forests or other dry sites. Now, the last one that we want to discuss is poison sumac. And it really grows very different than I think the poison oak and the poison ivy because it'll grow as a bush or small tree. And the article that I read, it could actually reach 20 feet. It can be confused with staghorn sumac, but poison sumac has white fruit that's flat and it will grow as a solitary plant and it has real smooth branches. Some of those branches could be red in color. And like noted area earlier, it does like to grow in a wet area, so more so than a dry space.
Okay, very good. Now, all three of these plants have a characteristic in common, though. They all
hmm
contain a substance called urushiol.
We
Okay,
practiced that.
yes, which causes a contact dermatitis. It's an oil from the plant, and that substance is very potent. In fact, they say that 500 people can be infected, or get a rash from the oil that can be contained on the head of a pin. That gives you some kind
hmm
of an idea of how potent that stuff is. And And that oil is contained in all parts of the plants, the leaves and the stems, and even the roots. So you have to be careful with dealing with these things. And that oil can survive for a long period of time. Some of the literature says 1 to 5 years, but they also reference the fact that, in archaeological digs, some of this oil has been uncovered after centuries and it still has caused a rash. So you got to be
Mm-hmm.
careful when you deal with it. It doesn't, deteriorate over winter if you pull up the plants, etc., and stuff like that. It can be there, and it can maintain itself on not only people but tools and pets, etc., and stuff like that. So, what do the people do if they're exposed to this oil, Ellen?
Well, the first thing you want to do is rinse with water. Um, you probably want to rinse within 10 to 20 minutes, no longer than that. You don't want to use soap when you first rinse because that has a tendency to move that oil around. But after that initial rinse, then you can use some soap with that water. Now, you have to remember that this oil is clinging to clothing and garden tools. So you want to make sure that you clean those items also with soap and water because that oil will cause additional reactions because it will stick to those pieces of clothing and garden tools. Even the same with your pets. They're not going to get the rash, but they're going to keep that additional oil exposure on their bodies. So you want to make sure that you give them a bath also.
So, Ellen, if you
Now,
if you come in
okay.
contact with this oil, what are you going to do for yourself other than you're going to rinse it with some water, okay, and you're going to clean those clothes? But is there anything else you can
Mhm.
do?
Typically, it's going to take a few weeks to resolve, but you can use some hydrocortisone creams, you can use some anti-itch creams, and you can use some calamine lotions. If this doesn't go away, then you might need some medical attention, especially if you get a rash around your eyes, your mouth, or your genital areas, or if this rash covers a large area of your body. You probably will need some medical support. And if you happen to develop a secondary infection, again, some medical help might be necessary. And like I said, those hydrocortisone creams and anti-itch creams they're the drying agents that you can use, and you can get those right over the counter.
Okay, right. Now, that's wonderful. Now, as far as eliminating the plants, okay, um, especially if you have it in your yard, the key is attack them when it's small. Don't let it get to
Right.
be a
Mm-hmm.
large problem. Small
Mm-hmm.
plots can actually be dug out, but you got to wear some protective clothing, and you got to be able to wash the tools. You can
Mm-hmm.
actually mow it if it's in the grass. You can mow it several different times, and it will kind of eliminate it over a period of time. But your best bet is some chemical sprays, some
Right.
herbicides that are
Mm-hmm.
specifically designed to kill poison ivy. So,
Mm-hmm.
get after it with those things. And it might take multiple sprays to do that. Growing on trees, if you find it growing on trees, you can actually spray those leaves. And once they die down a little bit, take a tool and pull it off carefully. Okay, and wear some protective
Very
clothing
carefully.
when you do
Mm-hmm.
that. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to burn those vines because that will vaporize that poison. You can actually breathe it in, and it'll cause some problems. Uh, I've told people who have called into the hotline about poison ivy after we've researched it a little bit. One of the things came down: hire somebody to take care of it. Okay,
Yeah.
and
Right.
the best place to call that we found is really a lawn care company. So they seem to have the best resources, the best chemicals, and the best clothing, etc., to take care of this. So Ellen, we've used up all of our time,
Okay.
so we have to stop about right now. So I hope that all that information kind of helps you. Don't be afraid of this, but just get after it
Be
and take
careful.
care of it in a logical manner. So until next time, thank you for listening.